I'm a coder, and everybody's telling me that ChatGPT is going to steal my job. Well, I'm skeptical, but I've got to try it for myself. Let's see if ChatGPT can code a chess game in the React web framework. ChatGPT, can you code a chess game for me in React? Okay, it's spitting out a bunch of text, but none of it looks like code yet. It looks like an outline of the code structure and logic that it wants to use. So that's pretty good because as a coder, you need requirements specified to you. So right now it's acting like a project manager, not like a coder. But the instructions look decent. It's saying that the board will be an 8x8 grid and it'll have a separate component for a square. So it's using object-oriented coding. And a square can be empty or it can have a piece on it. Keep track of the player's turn. Keep track of the positions on the board. Check for legal moves. This is very thorough, but it didn't actually write me any code. Let's see if it can do that. ChatGPT, will you write the code for step 1? It's doing something. Oh my heck. That looks like real code. And it's JavaScript, which is what React uses. I'm shocked. I actually cannot believe it just did this. Okay, let's skim over this code real quick. It looks like it's using letters to represent the chess pieces. So rook, knight, bishop, queen. And it's using uppercase in one half and lowercase in the other. I'm guessing that's to denote black versus white. I'm not an expert at React, but I think there's a way to code this in TypeScript with component syntax. I might ask it to rewrite that, but it's probably fine. So it left out this method, so I'll have to remember that and tell it to code that afterwards. And the square component I don't think has been defined yet, but it looks like it's passing the correct data. It's kind of doing a nested for loop for rendering the grids, columns, and rows. So the outer loop is going over the rows and the inner loop is going over the columns. I think I would have done it slightly differently because I already have an array up here, which is my board, and it knows the length of each of its arrays. So there wasn't a reason to retype the numbers 0 through 7 and 7 to 0, but it will work even though it's not the most optimal code. So it explains all the code here, but I just kind of skimmed over it myself, so I'm not going to read its explanation. But it seems fairly competent. The way it is coding the pieces is a little bit odd. I would have expected to use some kind of graphic image, but I guess it's using a Unicode. So let me see what these Unicode characters look like. I'm just going to copy this number, and then in a new tab, I'm going to search for Unicode character code 2654. So it says it's a white chess king, and the icon looks correct. So that's pretty cool. Unicode is just special symbols you can type with your keyboard, and it was designed for other languages like Japanese, kanji, for example. But I guess they've got drawings for chess characters. I wasn't aware of that. Now it looks like the code was cut off. It didn't tell me the Unicode for Q. Let me see why it's stuck. Maybe I'll tell it continue. Okay, it looks like it's able to finish, and it did put it in regular text instead of inside of the code box, but that's fine. That's actually probably not a bug with ChatGPT. That's probably just the website that's rendering it wrong when the code gets cut in half. Oh, and it explains the Unicode character thing. Awesome. Well, let me see if I can actually paste this code into a real project and get it to execute. So I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code. Now I'm going to open up a terminal and I'm going to execute create React app, and I'll call it ChatGPT_chess. This is a standard command that you use just to initialize a new project. It takes a minute to run. Okay, just finished. And on the left side, you'll see all the code that was auto-generated. This is not related to ChatGPT yet. This is just a blank React app. To execute it, I open the terminal and type npm run start. This will open a new window in Chrome with my project running. So this is just a blank template. Now let's paste in our ChatGPT code. So if I scroll back to the top, first it gave me this board component. So I'm going to click copy code, go back to VS Code, and in the source folder, right click, new file, and call it board.js for JavaScript. I'll paste it in and save, and that component should be finished. Now we'll go back and scroll down to see the rest of the code. So it wants a separate file for these pieces. New file, pieces.js. This is the one that was cut off, so I'll need to grab the extra piece and paste it in. So what's missing is there's no code to tell the board to render. That should be in my index.js file. can you code the index.js file to render the board? Okay, it looks like you can do it. Open index.js, paste my code, save. Also, it says it wants a square. That was a component referenced while rendering the board, but it didn't give me the code for that. So let me ask it. ChatGPT, can you code the square component? Okay, this is so impressive. It somehow understands the context, so it doesn't have to ask me to re-explain that I'm making a chess game or that square is referenced from my board. It just remembers what we've been talking about. That's pretty cool. If I were to code this, I think I would do drag and drop instead of click. Maybe we'll have it change that in the future, but otherwise it looks fine. I'll copy the code, make a new file, square.js, paste it and save. Looks like it compiled now. Okay, my page is completely blank. That's not good, something's wrong. So one issue here with ChatGPT is I don't think it's going to completely replace the programmer because you still have to guide it. You have to know where you're pasting the files. You have to know which pieces are missing so that you can ask it for clarification. So it's definitely super impressive so far, but if I were a novice with no coding skills, I would be completely lost as to what is wrong. Luckily, I'm not. I am a novice at React. I am a web developer, but I typically use Angular. So I pulled up the console to see what's wrong. It says that I'm using my piece names as children of a React component that I'm trying to render. I actually think the issue is this legend at the bottom, because pieces is a map that takes the letter K and turns it into the Unicode. I'm not really sure why ChatGPT thinks I even needed a legend, so I might just remove this. But I think the correct approach would have been to map this to just the value, just the Unicode character, and then I think it would have worked. And I could probably explain the issue to ChatGPT and have it fix it. But I'm just gonna erase this because I don't see the point in having a legend. So let me save the code and recompile. Okay, it looks a little bit better. It's definitely rendering things now, but I don't think the CSS is set up correctly to style so that the board is in a grid format. The icons are also really small. Maybe I can increase the font size. ChatGPT, can you provide the CSS to render the board? Not only does it know JavaScript, it also knows CSS. I'm not a graphics designer, so I'm not going to critique this code, but overall, it seems fine. Copy it. I already have an index CSS. Maybe I'll just paste it to the bottom here. Okay, my updated app looks much better. It's a grid format now. I think I would prefer to have some kind of border around the grid so that it's more obvious which squares I can move to. Let me ask ChatGPT to fix that. ChatGPT, can you add a border on the CSS for the square? Okay, that looks good. Paste it. So for some reason, the last column wrapped, and also the orientation is a bit odd. Normally, I would expect it to be top to bottom instead of left to right, but I didn't give it specific instructions, so I think I'll just ignore that. But probably the border caused the grid to wrap funny. So let me ask it to fix that. ChatGPT, after adding the border, it caused the grid to overflow its wrapping. Can you fix this? Okay, let's try that. Refreshing, and it looks beautiful. I'm actually super impressed. I'm a decent coder. ChatGPT is obviously way faster, but I would hope that I would code fewer bugs. But I'm terrible at graphics design. So asking it to generate the CSS, not only does it save me time, but it also does a better job than I would do. So let's see what the next step in our code needs to be. I wrote down earlier that the handle move needed to be coded. So let's ask it to do that. ChatGPT, can you code the handle move method for the board component? Okay, this looks great. It looks like it does not allow you to capture your own pieces. It also ensures that it's a legal move. Then it performs the move. It verifies if the king is in check, and it re-renders the grid afterwards. this looks like a correct implementation. It mentioned at the bottom here that there are multiple methods it did not code, so I'll have to ask it to code those as well. So first let me copy this and paste it into my board.js. When it tried to compile, it says it's missing a semicolon. It seems like it's just right here, but it's complaining that it's up here. Okay, it formatted it slightly differently. So the previous syntax was using lambda syntax, and I think that's because it's not using a class as a component, it's just using a function. In this case, it's making it a function underneath the class. So it seems like it lost its context. It didn't remember which format it gave me the board in the first time. So I can reformat this easily, and now it should work. And I think I already had a handle move. Yes, I did. So now it's duplicated. So instead of pasting a brand new one, I should have pasted inside of this method. So that should be fixed now. I'm sure I could have told ChatGPT that it coded it in the wrong format or syntax, and it could have fixed it. Maybe ChatGPT needs an internal compiler so it can check its code as it's writing it. So it's compiling now. Let's get the other methods. It said I need to get legal moves. ChatGPT, can you code the get legal moves method for the board? I was hoping by not saying the word component, it might give it to me in lambda syntax, but it's still giving it to me in class syntax.
1 hour later.
Okay, I've just realized that this entire process is doomed to be a miserable experience because I did not catch a major mistake ChatGPT made until the entire program was written. So I almost need to start over. The issue is the board that ChatGPT chose to use is a two-dimensional array, and the values inside of it are character symbols that stand for rook, knight, bishop, etc. However, if I scroll down to all the logic for actually moving the pieces around, which is very complicated logic, it's based on a single dimensional array. And so instead of thinking of it as an 8x8 grid, it's thinking of it as a 64 length array. And so the logic of get legal moves is going to be incorrect because the math for rows and columns will be off. In addition, instead of expecting a single character value like Q for queen, it's expecting an object which has properties underneath of it. That object has a color, a type, whether or not it has moved before, because that affects whether you can castle. So it almost seems like ChatGPT found two completely different solutions to building a chess game, and it merged them together. It used one data structure for rendering and a different data structure for the logic, and it did not notify me that the two data structures were not compatible. And so I've already pasted all this code into my project and tried to run it, and it's not working. At first, I tried to fix the code by fixing one bug at a time, but after an hour of fixing one bug after the other, I realized the bugs would never stop, and I was ruining the original purpose of this video, which was to have the AI do the coding, since I was coding everything myself at this point. In hindsight, I could have fixed the bugs in a different way that might have been easier. I could have written a function that transformed from one data type to the other. And that was my fault. I didn't recognize the root cause and fix it. Instead, I was patching one method at a time, not understanding the real issue. So because of this, I've decided rather than to ask ChatGPT to fix the code, I want to just do a second attempt and ask it to make a chess game from scratch again. But this time, as soon as I notice a data structure change or logic that's incompatible, I'll immediately tell it its mistake and have it regenerate the code rather than me fixing it myself.
2 hours later.
Okay, I've just finished recreating my whole project a second time with ChatGPT, and I was much more successful this time. Something surprising to me was I asked it the exact same question word for word, but the structure of the project that it suggested to me was different than the first time. And this time it suggested that I use drag and drop instead of clicking, which I think was a better experience. In addition, although it suggested Unicode characters like before, it also suggested SVG icons. And when it generated the CSS, it actually gave me PNG. That was actually hilarious. Let me scroll down and show you. So here it gave me the CSS, and when it got down to the pieces, it originally gave me a PNG. But because I did not have image files already, I asked it if it could draw them in SVG for me instead. SVG is a syntax for drawing. So here's the white pawn. If I copy this long URL and paste it into the browser, this does not look like a white pawn at all to me. I'm not sure how it came up with this. And the other ones were equally ridiculous. Here's a black pawn, seems to just be rotated upside down. Here's a white rook, and here's a white knight. That one looks pretty cool, I think. Well, safe to say, ChatGPT is not a good artist. So I decided just to download some PNG files instead. Luckily, Wikipedia had my back. These icons look good enough to me. Some other interesting things about the code. This time it used the React component syntax instead of the function lambdas that it was using before. I personally think this code's a little bit easier to read. And although it suggested drag and drop, it mixed up on-click and drag and drop a few times. So I did have to delete the on-click code and correct a couple of minor bugs with the drag and drop. It also tried to reference an icon array, which it had never created, and which also was not necessary because it used CSS to specify the PNG files to download. So the icon was not necessary. I did like the new board syntax that it used. It kept it multidimensional, but it used objects to store properties of each piece, which was much better than just the single character of capital R for a white rook and lowercase r for a black rook that it was using before. And I did find an annoyance with ChatGPT where anytime it's giving you a large amount of code, it seems to skip logic frequently and tell you that you need to implement it on your own. But then afterwards, if you ask it to code that function, it will do it. And it's annoying to have to ask 20 times for different functions, but luckily you can comma separate them. So if you have a large list, you can just say, give me the code for handle, square, click, and legal moves, and legal pawn moves, etc. Which came in handy because there were frequent times when I had multiple functions, which it refused to define the first time. The new code also had slightly worse logic than the original. The first time it checked for checkmate and check for me, and it also handled castling, but this new code seemed to skip those altogether. I'm certain if I asked it specifically to code those functions for me, it would, but I just wanted to get a playable game going so that I could test it as I was starting to get frustrated. So I chose not to ask it. Neither one seemed to cover the en passant rule of pawns either, or the ability to upgrade a pawn if you promote it all the way to the end of the board. There were also a couple times like this where it would get cut off at the end of a sentence while I was still writing code, and I would have to tell it to continue, and the next section of code would come out as regular text instead of inside of a code box. This was a minor annoyance. The code still worked fine. And in particular, when it was drawing the SVG, sometimes it would get stuck at the end of its drawing where it wouldn't give me the rest of the image. And when I would ask it to continue, instead of finishing its drawing, it would start over. So some of these pictures, I was never able to see how ugly the drawing was that it actually generated. So for future reference, I've decided just don't let ChatGPT draw anything. It did also seem to skip between different architectures like the first time, but luckily this time it was just for the CSS and just for parts of the CSS that I had already decided to switch to PNG. So for example, these are all SVG, but for other pieces besides the king, it was only giving me the SVG without all of these extra settings. So I imagine if I mixed this king with the other pieces, the formatting would be very wrong and mismatched because the others had much simpler styles. But the exciting news is here I have a working chess game written almost entirely by ChatGPT. I only had to fix a couple of minor bugs by hand, and if I had been more patient, I probably could have got ChatGPT to fix them for me. Without further ado, let's run it and see how it looks. So you can see my grid structure. Each cell has the labels that you would expect. It is still oriented sideways, which is odd, but I can move my pieces and it's drag and drop. So I want to challenge ChatGPT to play me in a chess game. ChatGPT, let's play chess. My move, number 1, E4. Hey, it wants to play. It says its move is E5. Okay, let me keep this up to date on my grid. So I moved to E4 and it moved to E5. Where should I move next? Well, I'm terrible at chess. If I play very long, I'm just gonna get confused and it's gonna beat me. So I'm gonna try a trick I learned when I was a kid. Supposedly there's a 3-move checkmate. I just have to remember it. I think it uses the queen and the bishop. I think they each move diagonally and then they line up to attack the king. Let me think. Maybe queen goes to F3 and then charges forward to F7. That would attack the king. And then the bishop has to protect it. So if it's gonna be at F7, the bishop would have to be up here at C4. I'm gonna try that, see what happens. If it doesn't work, I'm just going to surrender and say that it beat me. Okay, so I'll say queen to F3. Now how do I tell it that's where I'm moving? Number 2, I guess I better say my move is number 2, queen to F3. Well, it says I'm stupid and I shouldn't have moved my piece there. Well, it's probably right. It says knight to C6. C6 is right here, so it must be this knight moving. Okay, I don't know if it's ruined my 3-move checkmate or not, but I'm gonna keep moving. So I don't wanna move my queen yet because my bishop's not in place. So I wanna do bishop to C4. I think it's smart to see if your piece might be attacked or not. I don't see anything obvious, but Magnus Carlsen could probably tell me what I'm doing wrong. Okay, how do I tell it that's where I moved? My move is 3 bishop to C4. C4. Oh, nice. It said I made a good move. Okay, it says it's going to move its bishop to C5. C5 is right here. Which bishop is that? This one, I guess. Okay. Am I about to win? Wait, I don't think it caught my move. If I move queen right here, can it stop me? The king could move onto this queen, but then the bishop would kill it. This bishop not lined up. It can't block it. The knight can't hit it. The queen can't block it. Could the king just move out of the way? No, either way it moves, it'll be next to the queen still. Okay, I actually think I just checkmated ChatGPT. Unfortunately, the code that it wrote doesn't check for checkmates. The first version did, but I couldn't get that code to run because the data structures didn't match up. The second version was missing it, and I was afraid if I asked it to code it, it might break something else. So maybe that's for the next exercise, but I decided to test it out first. Well, let me move my queen there and see what it says, because I think that might be a checkmate. So how do I say that? It moves to F7, and I think there was a pawn here. I might have to tell it to capture the pawn. Yeah, there was a pawn there. Okay, so my move is number 4, queen. I think X means captured, and then F7. I probably don't have to say capture, it's probably implied. Wait a second, it says that's an illegal move? Did I cheat? I didn't cheat. Illegal move in chess. In fact, it's impossible to capture a piece with your queen on F7 on the 4th move. Wait, is this the 4th move or 3rd? 1, 2, okay, it is the 4th move. I lied, I thought it was a 3-move checkmate. I can't on the 4th move because the black pawn is still on E5 and would capture your queen if you moved it there. Wait, there's a black pawn on E5? Yes, that's true. How is he saying that his black pawn is going to capture my queen on F7? Don't pawns have to capture diagonally? And it can only move towards the chessboard's rotated funny, but it's blocked by the E4. It can only capture on F4 or D4. And I was on F3. It can't capture me on F7? What? Okay, well, it says I can't capture a piece, but I did capture a piece. I guess I could remove the capture. I just say I moved to that spot. I don't know if it matters if F is capitalized or not. Okay, it was the exact same move. What the heck? Okay, it was the same move I did before, but it says it's not legal because it's occupied by his pawn. Well, obviously, because I just killed your pawn. That's why I said capture. I think there's also a way to say that you got checkmate. So if I said queen captures F7, I don't know, it's like exclamation or something means it's a check, and pound means it's checkmate or something. I practiced chess like a year ago, but I don't remember the rules very well. But this is like a short notation to say where the units are moving. Well, ChatGPT, I think you're cheating. Queen captures f7 is a legal move, and it is checkmate. You are trying to trick me because you don't want to lose. Okay, what's going on here? He says, well, I don't know if it's a he or she, but ChatGPT says they are not cheating. Then I miscommunicated, but it is a legal move. Okay, well, I'm glad it's legal, but it says it's not checkmate. It's a discovered check, which means that the queen is attacking the king and uncovering an attack by a bishop or a knight. However, in response to this move, I can play king to d8, which would allow my king to escape from the check and the game would continue. Okay, let's see what it's talking about. King to d... No, wait a second. How are you going to go to d8? That's a queen. Is he capturing his own queen with his king? I'm pretty sure that's an illegal move. I think there's some players that can play chess blindfolded and they just memorize in their mind where every piece is. I have a feeling that's what ChatGPT is doing, but it forgot that it has a queen here. You're still cheating. King to d8 is not a legal move because your queen is on d8. Wait, okay. I think I did checkmate it, and it just doesn't want to admit defeat. It says to start again from the beginning, and he's going first. I don't want to play with a cheater. I already mated you. Well, I give up. That was really fun. So I guess I'll give a summary. To be honest, ChatGPT was way more powerful than I expected. I thought there was no way it was going to be able to write any code at all because I feel like programming requires complex logic that an AI is not yet capable of doing. However, I was completely wrong. It wrote some really good code that was very complex and worked for the most part, and it was able to do it very quickly, which saved me a lot of time. I still wonder how much it understood what it was coding and if it actually coded it or if it simply plagiarized it from the internet somewhere. Because I imagine they built it by scraping the internet and there's tons of example code online. So maybe it just found a chess engine someone else had already written and it just copy and pasted the code. But it felt like it was doing more than that because if I would ask it to reformat the same code that it had just written into a different architecture, it was able to do it correctly. And I don't think it would have just found another copy of chess code in that other architecture to plagiarize, because if it did, the variable names would have all changed. The comments would have all changed, but they didn't. When I asked it to reformat, it only changed what I asked it to change. So I think it does understand the code to some extent. So maybe in a newer version, it will be able to code better. It's not even close to perfect at this point. So as a professional coder, I don't think I would use this on the job because it's too buggy and it would get me fired. I'd have to spend a lot of time double checking the code, proofreading it, testing it. And even though it would save me time in the initial coding, all the bug fixing would probably waste more time than what it saved me. And in addition, I didn't have to explain to it the chess rules because it's a well-defined game that it already understood. On the job, I build applications that are very specific to my customers, and their requirements are not well documented. I have to have a phone call with the user to ask them what they want. I have to try to interpret what they mean and then turn that into code. So in order to use ChatGPT to code my business applications, I would have to thoroughly document what my users needed and explain it to ChatGPT in a way that it understands. Maybe with more experience practicing with it, I could get to that point, but I feel like that documentation step and trying to tease the solution out of ChatGPT might be harder than just coding it myself. However, somewhere I think this could be extremely useful is in the prototyping stage, because if you have a new idea for a program that does not yet exist, typically you don't have a well-defined game plan of exactly how you want to code it. You're going to experiment a lot. And once you get a working prototype and show it to your users, you might realize that you're building the wrong product. They want something different. The features need to change. So you don't want to write perfect code the first time. You want to write code as quickly as possible so you can get a demo, even if it's only half working. And then you want to improve the demo until it makes your users happy. And then afterwards, you want to clean up the code to remove the bugs and make it stable and robust. So I think ChatGPT could be very good at rapid prototyping. Another place I think it might be useful is in discovering new technologies. So for example, I coded this in React, but when I make web apps, I typically use Angular. So there's a lot of syntax I'm not familiar with, and ChatGPT gave me a shortcut in that it coded all the boilerplate code for me without me having to look up a tutorial and copy and paste. However, I think it's important to still read the documentation and learn it on your own, because if a student used this tool too much as a crutch to write the code for them, I'm afraid they wouldn't actually learn how the technologies work under the hood. And that's an important skill to have as a programmer, to learn to analyze code, know how to fix it, and to come up with algorithms on your own. So if I were a student trying to learn coding for the first time, I think I would try to code it myself first, and then afterwards use ChatGPT only if I got stuck, or to critique my code and tell me what I could do to improve it. Now, if I didn't care about learning to code and I just wanted to throw together a quick program, I think it would be fine to use ChatGPT the whole way. The problem is, in its current state, it's too buggy. And so I'm afraid without any coding skills, I would just be lost. It doesn't tell you, for example, where to copy and paste the code, how to run the code, how to troubleshoot the errors. And maybe if I asked it more questions, like where should I paste this code, maybe it would guide me through the steps a little bit more. But I'm afraid if you had no tech skills at all, you might just get frustrated and lost. But overall, I think it's an amazing technology. I'm excited to see what else it can do besides coding and what other things it can code. And if this improves, it could definitely be a game changer in the future. Thanks for watching.